of this lesson is learn how to get an input from the keyboard in Python. To get the input from the keyboard, you should use the function called input. The general format of an input function is that you say input and open parentheses with some optional prompt and then close parentheses. Here is an example of it. A variable name on the left, an equal sign, then you say input and open a parenthesis, put some kind of optional prompt and then close parenthesis. A prompt is something that you ask from the user before he or she types the answer. And notice that the prompt is optional. That means you may or may not have a prompt if you want to. So let me jump to a sample program and show you how all of this is done. I'm going to open the Python IDLE and create a new file by going to File, click on New File. So as you know, a new text editor opens, and again, as usual, the name of the file would be untitled. So the first thing that you always have to do, go to File and Save As. A dialog box opens and you should give this file a name that you remember later and put it in a directory that you can find it. Of course, the extension has to be .py and save it. Again, on the top you see that all of this information is shown. Now I will write a program to get input from the user. Let's see what happens when I run this program. I hit F5, and as you notice, immediately the prompt which I typed here will appear in the Python IDLE. Now Python is waiting for the user to type something. So let's imagine the user types Jack here, and as soon as you push the return, it will go to the next line and prints what you asked, which is glad to meet you, Jack. Remember that in previous lessons I kind of mentioned that you should use descriptive names and don't use variables such as X and Y, even if your program is very small. So to get used to it, let me change the name of this variable to something which is a little more meaningful. Again, I didn't change anything in this program and everything is the same, and if I hit F5 again, it will ask me the same question again, and I can answer anything I want and it says the same thing. Also notice that the prompt is not necessary. So if I didn't put anything here, when I run my program this time and hit F5, see, it's waiting for me to give an answer. However, it doesn't give me any prompt. So if I say Jack here and push return, I still get the statement which says glad to meet you. However, it never asks me what is your name. So to repeat, when you want to get the input from the keyboard, you use the input function and you learn what the prompt is. However, there is a very important note that I have to mention. You have to remember that the input function returns a string even if the user types a number. Now, what does this mean? Let me show it to you by an example. Let me open the Python IDLE one more time. Let me use one of our previous examples. So I'm going to open the program that we wrote to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit. Before I do anything, let me clean up this program by adding a comment on the top and using more descriptive identifiers in this program. So what I have done is to add a comment on the top and made the name of the variables more descriptive, and also combine the 3 lines of calculation into 1 line. This still is the same exact calculation. As you can see, we are getting the Celsius temperature, multiplying it by 9, and then dividing the result by 5, and then adding 32 to the result of that. So if I run this program, I still get exactly the same result, and 60 degrees Celsius is equivalent to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Now let me try and get the input from the user. Let's try something like so I'm trying to ask the user to give me the input temperature, and I'm trying to put it into a variable called Celsius. But before I run this program, you should notice that I will get an error, and you will see in a minute why. Let me run it. The first thing it does, it asks the user, please input a temperature in Celsius. So let's say again, I will say 60 degrees. And as soon as I push the return, I get an error. The reason for this error is that, as I mentioned before, the input function always returns a string. So even though the user types 60, but the input function treats this as a character 6 and a character 0. So it is not the number 60, but is a string of 2 characters, which is 60, and the type of the returned value is a string. So what happens is that when you try to do mathematical operations on a character string, then you will get an error, because mathematical operations such as division are not defined for string characters. So what do we have to do? What we have to do is, whatever we get from the user, we have to convert it to a number. So let me call this variable a different name. And now I'm going to convert the user response to a number. And to convert a string to a number, all you have to do is, so what this line does, gets the input from the user, and then by using this function, its conversion, it converts it to an integer. Now this time, if I run my program by hitting F5 and putting 60 on it, it gives me the correct answer. I can also convert the user response to a floating point number in case the user types a floating point number. For example, in this case, I'm converting the user response to a floating point number. So let me run this program. If the user types 60, everything is exactly the same. However, if I go and run it again, now in this case, if the user types 60.5, then you get the corresponding Fahrenheit with floating point numbers. So what did you learn in this lesson? First of all, you learned that to get the input from the keyboard, you use the input function. And second, you learned that the function input always returns a string. And if you're asking for a number or any other type, then you must convert the returned string to the proper type.